For those of you who don't know me, my name's Torrance, and I'm the campaign director for the Wilderness Committee. I'm calling in tonight from the unceded Lekwungen territories of the Esquimalt and Songhees people. And wherever any of us are calling in from today, we're calling in from the territory of an Indigenous nation. And whenever we're advocating for solutions to the problems that we see, be them social problems or environmental problems, the solutions need to be grounded in justice for those nations and for the return of land to them. And that's what this webinar, that's what the court case is all about. So it's awesome to have all of you here with us this evening. The Wilderness Committee is honored to provide space for this conversation this evening. I'm joined by my colleagues Em and Alex. Em will be facilitating the Q&A a little later, and Alex is keeping things running on the tech end tonight. So I join them in thanking you all again for being here. So a rundown of this evening, if all goes to plan, in just a moment, we'll watch a short video to get a look at the power of the Nuchatlaht hahoulthee, or territory, and its people. After that, we'll hear from 3 speakers from the nation and its legal team. And after the speakers, we'll get into a Q&A. And I think rather than have folks unmute and ask your question, we'll have you drop your questions into the chat box on the bottom of your screen there. And my colleague Em will read out as many as we can get to before the end tonight. So if a question comes up while the speakers are speaking, please drop your question in the chat box and we'll get to those, again, as many as we can. After the Q&A, we'll hear some closing remarks from the Nuchatlaht and drop some ways that you can stay involved, get involved and take action on this, and then we'll part ways for the evening. So without further ado, I'll introduce the video. We thought this would be a good way to kind of get grounded in the beauty of the territory that we're talking about tonight. This video is an exclusive world premiere. It's never been seen before outside of by a few of us. It's by Vancouver filmmaker and a great friend of the Nuchatlaht, Daniel Pierce. The video will be public tomorrow. Various groups will be sharing it around. I think a condensed version as well. You can share it with everyone you know then. But for now, we'll all enjoy it together. Alex, can you cue that up now?
Growing up in Nuchatlaht was awesome. It's such a beautiful place. One of the most beautiful places in the world as far as I'm concerned.
At Nuchatlaht, we used to help one another. We made sure that everyone was taken care of.
The Nuchatlaht are one of many First Nations that were pushed off their traditional homelands by the onslaught of colonization. But on March 21st, they're taking the BC government to court to get their land back.
Nuchatlaht is one of the small First Nations on the west coast of Vancouver Island, but they were there when Captain Cook came in the 1700s. They've been there. They've always been there. And what they're saying is that they would like to claim their legal rights. They'd like to claim them in court on a claim of Aboriginal title.
Nuchatlaht has continuously occupied and stewarded their territory on Nootka Island for thousands of years. But after decades of clear-cut logging, the forests, fish, and wildlife have been badly depleted.
Yellow cedar is hard to come by, and the red cedar that we have left, we seem to be the last ones to get our hands on it.
I think our trees are our strength. They give structure to our land, and we've got so many washouts now, mudslides and everything, because we don't have the trees there to protect it.
We had a rich way of living. It's just been getting smaller and smaller, and the only way that we can have a foot in the door is if we own and manage it, and then people will listen.
This is the first Aboriginal title case in BC since the landmark Chilcotin decision and the passage of BC's new UNDRIP law. But the BC government is still arguing in court that the Nuchatlaht Nation abandoned their territory.
They didn't abandon their territory. They were forced off their territory. Their land was expropriated without compensation. Their land was stolen from them. That's what happened. The government of British Columbia's defense, their main defense in this case, is that the Nuchatlaht We're too small and weak to have Aboriginal title. Nuchatlaht may be small, but they're powerful, and they exist, and they continue.
Taiye Jordan Michael, the chief of Nuchatlaht, is hopeful this title case will usher in a new era of healing and prosperity for his people.
Housing, for one, for our people, is that we can't afford to house our people, right? So it's going to solve a lot of our housing problems and our social issues. That's what really excites me.
We need to keep the benefits here in our communities, but to be respectful to the land.
I want to start doing a lot of things that the provincial and federal governments aren't doing, that are supposed to be doing, just to bring the forest back, to let the land start to heal itself.
Title and rights, I think, is going to be an eye-opener for our people. I want to teach my children and grandchildren and my great-grandchildren about where we come from and why it's really important.
We have a voice, and we want to let you guys know that we're here and we've existed here, and we want to share that.
And I have absolutely no doubt that we will win, because we believe in who we are.
Come join us down on the steps of the courthouse on March 21st to kick off this court case and show support. Just like to extend that invitation to anybody who wants to come.
All right. Okay, so kind of improvising a little bit here. Alex, can you give me a thumbs up if we were able to patch Archie in? Okay, looking good. It looks like he's there by phone. So Archie, I'll introduce you now. Our first speaker tonight is a man who those of us who have been working to support the Nuchatlaht have been honored to learn so much from, about Nuchatlaht territory and history, of course, but also just about friendship and solidarity and working together and kind of moving in the same direction in this world. I think that is so underrated, and in these times, especially with everything happening in the world, I'm really grateful for the presence of Hisamanoth, or Archie Little, in my life and in so many of our lives. Hisamanoth is a house speaker for the Nuchatlaht, and he'll speak now, I believe, by phone about his people and their lands and waters now. Archie, you can take it away.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, by video. Great. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I'll try and shut my phone off. Okay, you can hear me? Is Jordan on?
I think we're still working to patch him in. Hopefully he'll join us later.
Yeah, because I don't know what I did, but I got on. Hi, Jack.
Archie.
Everybody, I first want to pay my respects to our late Taiye with Islamish, and of course to Walter's grandfather, Islamish, and his dad, Waikash, and Islamish's wife, Koina, and Rose, and all those that made us good who we are, why we're so proud to be who we are. And I just want to pay my respects to our ancestors because they've done a great job of making us proud. We're small, but we're proud. And I think, to me, the main purpose of what we're doing is that we need to return the land and the resources back to our hotware, to manage, to protect, to enhance, to manage, to own, to protect, to access, and to share. Our governance, we've proven for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we had no homelessness. We had nobody hungry. We had nobody out of work. We helped each other. We supported each other. And we need to get back to that. And I think, one of the driving forces that was behind this when I reported to Heat Samish was that, the Western Forest Products said we can't make a decision because our bosses are in New York. I said, no, he's sitting right there. That's who we believe the boss is. And I think we've given uh, every opportunity for them to do well because our wealth was abundance and it was managed as such. It wasn't just take until there's nothing left. They've had 150 years, and look at the state we're in now. We have to stand up. We have to take ownership. We have to protect, and we have to manage it way better. And how do we bring the teams on board to do that? And all you have to do is look at the herring state. When I first started fishing herring in Nuchatlaht, the spawn would go from Steamer Point right into the Mary Basin. That's a long way. By the time we started fighting to stop it, it was just in front of Nuchatlaht. That's how much it shrunk in just a few years. And of course, what we've given up as a Nuchatlaht are halibut, salmon, rock cod, ducks, seals that came into Rosa Harbor chasing the herring. We also lost that. We didn't have to go far to get it, but just to focus on having local management, local ownership. Out of that needs to come local benefits, where the funding stays in our communities, where it doesn't go out of the province, it doesn't go out of the country. It stays, and it's an aid to people that live with us. With Nuchatlaht people and those that live around us, and we support each other because we've seen that destruction. And I speak to a lot of non-Aboriginals, and they're supportive because they want certainty in what we can and can't do, and they want to survive too. And so, how do we support each other to ensure that we do survive, that we flourish? Nuchatlaht is one of the richest hahoulthees in our Nuchatlaht land, very, very wealthy. But if we keep mismanaging, if we keep giving it away, then we're failing, because we're not stopping it. And well, I guess stopping it is not the proper words, but we're not insisting on better management, where all decision makers need to come to the table, and we decide if there's a pie, and when we decide the health of that pie, then we all decide how that pie is cut, and that's the fairest process that I know of, and hopefully we do have a lot of support in what we're doing, and they know our history, because I've talked about Nuchatlaht from Cape Breton to Alaska. I've always talked about the hereditary system, and the Alaskan First Nations were very, very interested in what we were doing and how we govern ourselves. That's Nuchatlaht. That's always been Nuchatlaht, because that's how we govern ourselves through our and through our council, and and I spoke of the wealth of the hahoulthee of Nuchatlaht. People are part of that wealth because we're proud, we're loud, we like to stand up. We lead the fight in for protecting the herring, and now we need to lead the fight in protecting salmon, and through that we've created salmon parks, and our chiefly river, stream, Ho'asa, we have to protect that because it belongs to our Taiye Hotwood. And we have to go to war to protect that. And it's sad that we have to go to court. That they push, and refuse to change and improve and have accountability in what they do. They just carry on with and then of course we get the blame in the end. But we want to stop that. But we want to manage that a lot better. We've given them every opportunity to do that, and now we're running out of time. We're running out of resources, and we have to now become very strategic. And I push that ownership, protection, enhancement, access, and sharing is what Nuchatlaht has always done. And we need to instill that in all the nations, and then we'll work together. We'll be a voice, we'll be one voice. So how is that?
That's great. Thank you so much, as always. Those words to get us kind of grounded in what this fight's about, and you always speak so eloquently about your people and your history. So thank you, Archie. Next, I think we'll go to the lawyer for this trial. Jack Woodward will be a name that's familiar to a lot of you who are familiar with Indigenous rights and title cases in this country. Jack is a lawyer with decades of experience. He started working for Nuchatlaht specifically, I think quite a while before I was born. Sorry, Jack. And he's representing the Nuchatlaht on their title claim with the hearings kicking off in just over 2 weeks on March 21st. So we'll hear from Jack now a little bit about that process, about the upcoming hearings, and sort of a little bit of the legal, hopefully in layman's terms for the rest of us. But yeah, Jack, take it away now.
Thanks, Torrance, and thanks to all of you. I'm very honored. So many people whose names I recognize, accomplished people, busy people, members of civil society, people I've known for a long time, Lloyd Stonehawker calling in from Kamloops, people all over the country. And I'm very grateful that you spend the time to listen to this really amazing story that Archie has been telling you about, and that video was about. But I want to take you into a little bit of depth about what's happening. It gets a bit political, but I don't make any apology for that. I want you to know that this case is, of course, a case of great public importance. Everybody knows the issue. I dug up in a book. I've got another book to show you. This little book is called Papers Connected with the Indian Land Question. It was published by the government of British Columbia in 1875. So 147 years ago, the government of British Columbia already had a collection of documents and acknowledged that there was a problem dealing with the lands of the Indigenous people. And it's been an unresolved issue, an unresolved problem. It's been the shame of British Columbia. It's really our original sin in this province that there has been no proper dealing with the First Nations about their lands, which were simply taken.
Mhm.
And what's new, what's interesting is that the current government has said they've made a promise. They promised that they're going to conduct this litigation on a principled basis. I have a letter from the Attorney General written to me 2 years ago on February 13th, 2020, and he said, we're going to conduct this litigation in a spirit of reconciliation on a principled basis. I just received an hour and a half ago, the province's, this is called a pleading. This is the province response to the second further amended civil claim. And I thought, oh boy, just an hour ago, I thought, oh, this is the moment when the province is finally going to change its position. After all these years, after resisting the idea of Aboriginal title, for 147 years. Maybe this is it. 2 weeks before trial. I was disappointed once again. You might not be surprised, but in the response that I just received, the province said 3 things that you might be interested in. First of all, that the Nuchatlaht haven't been there. They haven't been on the land. And of course, what happened was that when the Crown assumed ownership of all of British Columbia, it became an offense to cut a tree or build a house on Crown land. And now they're arguing against the Nuchatlaht, hey, you're not there living in your houses, cutting down your trees, so you can't be owning the land. And they were evicted. They were forced off their land by the Government's Act. This is a disgraceful argument that our government is making right now, that just made an hour ago, that's going to be presented to court right across the street from where I am right now in British Columbia Supreme Court starting on March 21st. And I'm embarrassed that our province continues to advance that position. And there's still time. I'm calling upon the Attorney General to turn it around. There's still time to not do that disgraceful thing one more time. What else does this fresh statement of defense say? It says that British Columbia laws displaced Aboriginal title. That if there was Aboriginal title, it got displaced. Now that's a new word. We hadn't heard that one before. That's the extinguishment argument, recycled with a different word. It says because the colony and then the province of British Columbia came and passed laws about those very trees, about those very lands, Aboriginal title was extinguished. Now we know that that's a discredited and disgraceful argument that doesn't exist anymore and cannot exist in the face of the law, the Constitution, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That argument does not exist. You cannot say that Indigenous title was displaced or extinguished, but here's our province still saying it just an hour and a half ago. Finally, this is the one that gets Archie going. Archie, who you just heard him speak, he says the Nuchatlaht were too small and weak to have Aboriginal title. We call that one, we're joking about it now, we call it the Luxembourg defense. There's no reason for Luxembourg to exist, squished between the great powers of France and Germany after being overrun by Napoleon and Bismarck and de Gaulle and Hitler, and yet somehow Luxembourg is still there. And that's like Nuchatlaht, they're still there. They ask Archie if the Nuchatlaht is too small and weak to exist. Ask President Zelensky if the Ukraine is too small and weak to exist. This is the bully's argument. And I'm embarrassed that our province is still making the bully's argument. That they say that only the strong have a right to survive. Nuchatlaht was small. And they had this magnificent territory, and they had a complex and very intricate network of diplomatic and family relationships with their neighboring tribes, which guaranteed their continued existence. They had control over some sheltered and very defensible places to live on the west coast of Nootka Island. They controlled the great dentalia resource, which the dentalia were a little marine shell that was harvested and used as currency throughout much of North America, and it all came right there, much of it came right from Nuchatlaht territory. They controlled the chief, the Taiye, which is the grand chief of the Nuchatlaht, his hahoulthee, which is the basket of ownership rights, included the dentalia site for harvesting it just off the coast. And so they were wealthy. The Nuchatlaht people were wealthy people. And at the moment when they were impacted by smallpox and colonization and depopulation, at their weakest moment when they were being sent to residential school, the governments of Canada and British Columbia passed laws taking away all of their land and assigning it to the Crown, and then the Crown issued forest licenses to multinational corporations, giving them the right to cut the trees. And now the province comes to court and says, you weren't there, so you must have abandoned your land. You must have abandoned it, and therefore you don't have it anymore. It's a disgraceful argument. And the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples says that that is not a tenable argument anymore, anywhere in the world for any Indigenous people. You can't say that because they were forced off their land, they no longer have land rights. It fixes that injustice. And British Columbia has quite honorably promised to implement the United Nations Declaration, as has the Government of Canada. And they're both defendants in this case, and yet both of them can't quite bring themselves to put into action their promises. And that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for them to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, we're just going to go to court, which we're going to do in 2 weeks, and we're going to win. And in the face of the same old resistance that First Nations have faced for 147 years, we're going to go to court, and we're going to get them back their land. We're going to get the Nuchatlaht their land back. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I know that there's going to be questions. But once again, I'm grateful for all of you for your time and your attention and for being interested in this historic case. The rally, by the way, what's happening is the court starts at 10 o'clock in the courthouse at 800 Smythe Street. The rally's at the other end at the Nelson Street entrance in Vancouver, and that's the courthouse steps. You can't go inside the courthouse with a rally, but you can be on the courthouse steps, so I hope it's not a rainy day. And this is reminiscent of the day when this case was launched, when the Nuchatlaht people came down from Nootka Island and stood on the courthouse steps, and there was a ceremony in connection with the filing of the original claim. And that process has been going on now for 4 or 5 years, and culminating in the actual trial. Now, the chief at that time was the late Chief Walter Michael, and he was just referred to by a few moments ago by Archie Little, and he's passed away, and the chieftainship now is held by his son, Jordan Michael. One of the bits of evidence in the case was hinted to just now by Archie, and I just want to further explain it to you. There has been an unbroken succession of chiefs as far back as records go. And we're going to show that to the court. It's a wonderful and fascinating history of the history and succession of Nuchatlaht chiefs, including one of the first recorded names of a Nuchatlaht chief was when Captain John Kendrick came in 1771, and he met Chief Terrasom. Well, the late Walter Michael, who just passed away a couple of years ago, had the name Terrasom. The name, the position, the land, the title, and all of the rights of ownership have been passed on from generation to generation. And our argument is really very simple: that Indigenous people, like all Canadians, have the right to inherit the wealth of their grandparents, and everyone has a right to leave a will and to inherit something from their ancestors. And so do Aboriginal people. They have a right to the land that their ancestors owned. It's a very simple argument. And that right that was cut off by government actions in the past decades is what we're going to fix in this court case. So anyway, thank you very much, all of you, for listening and for your time. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Jack. Archie, I see you waving there. Do you want to respond quickly to Jack? We have a minute or two before I introduce Taiye. You're muted, it looks like.
Okay, could I just be really quick? I'm glad Jack mentioned reconciliation. I think that we need to get on the same boat, and that, to me, reconciliation starts at contact. The government plays games and, they can't define it. Well, we'll define it for them. It starts at contact because they messed up our way of living that was based on people and wealth and abundance. And we have to understand our hahoulthee. our chieftainships in Nuchatlaht land. We have to understand what it means, because we believe that came from the Creator, and all the Hatwe married Hakum, and that's how they're connected. If Nuchatlaht was in trouble, all the Nuchatlaht people would come and help because they're related. People have to understand that. Thank you.
Thanks for that context, Archie. Thanks for laying out the legal side of things, Jack. I know you get a bit heated, but how you keep your cool in front of the province's lawyers when they're making these, I think you used the word shameful arguments, is beyond me. It's quite a skill, and I'm glad you're in the courtroom, not me. Before we get into some questions from all of you this evening, we'll hear from Taiye Hatwe Klakwiskum. Jordan Michael is the chief of the Nuchatlaht Nation, and he'll be in Vancouver for the hearings in a couple of weeks, and he'll share a few words with us now. Taiye.
Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks, Torrance. Yeah, no, I apologize for was having some technical difficulties here, but and just to hear what Jack said there at the last minute was, you know, I don't know if I was really holding my breath or not for good news, you know, just considering the way, you know, Canada has been towards us up until now, you know, like there's been no sight of UNDRIP or, you know, any of that good faith yet. So I was not holding my breath, and yeah, sure enough, there's no change in their tactics, right? So no, it's pretty disappointing, yeah, but it's no surprise. I think they could have saved themselves some embarrassment, but I guess we'll bring it to them, right? So I guess, yeah, yeah, sorry for the late start, and I appreciate everybody being here to listen to our story, and everybody that's here to share it with us. Yeah, thank you. Let go.
Thank you. All right. Despite the tech difficulties, we're way ahead of schedule here. We've got plenty of time for questions from folks. We'll do that in the chat function along the bottom of your screens. There's a bunch of different icons, and if you click on the one that says "More," you'll have the option to click on chat, and then you could just type your question in there. Make sure you have the question to everyone. We also have a live feed going on Facebook. I'll check that for any questions. If any folks watching on Facebook have any questions, they can jump in, and I'll turn things over to my colleague M. Hoffpower, who does a ton of work for us at the Wilderness Committee supporting the Nuchatlaht, and she'll sort of facilitate getting questions to our speakers here for the next little while. M, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, so we're just gonna wait for some questions to come through right now. Alex, if you want to let me know if there's any questions on Facebook Live, that would be great. So the first question is from Charlotte. How can we help?
Well, I'll take a try at it. I think that the government has taken on a big project here when they say they're going to implement UNDRIP, and they don't really know how to do it. And they need help. They need people, ordinary citizens, to say, well, here's how you could help. If you really believe in UNDRIP, you've got to change the way in which you deal with questions like Aboriginal rights and Aboriginal titles. So you got to change it on the ground, not just in theory, not just big talk, but actually change it on the ground. So it's the old civil society thing. I mean, phone or write or email your MLA or the Attorney General and say you expect some change. Is one way you could help. Thank you.
And at the very end, we'll have some take actions and some ways to contribute to the legal fees and that kind of thing. There are other ways that you can help that we'll talk about a little bit later. So another question here says, how does the Attorney General propose to justify its latest statement of defense with the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which is in full force and effect and applies to all the laws of BC?
I'll take that one on. A legal question. Eve, I appreciate the question, and of course I can't answer for the Attorney General. I can criticize the Attorney General, but I can't answer for him. We have already, Nuchatlaht has already raised, Nuchatlaht was the first, I want to tell you something about Nuchatlaht. It's a tiny little First Nation. They were the very first First Nation to raise the UNDRIP in British Columbia Supreme Court. That was a couple of years ago when it first came out, and in the Supreme Court of Canada. The very first Nuchatlaht was. Nuchatlaht was the only First Nation from British Columbia that went to COP26 last November in Glasgow. Tiny but mighty is the slogan that Archie uses, and he may be a little modest, but punching above its weight is a good way to express it about Nuchatlaht. But in any event, how to get the government to implement UNDRIP, it's a big project. I respect that, and they have a process is starting to begin, but they just have to work harder. You can't make a promise like that. You can't make a solemn promise to all of the Indigenous people and to all of the citizens, all of us who feel ashamed of this past, of this British Columbia past. It's a promise to all of us that UNDRIP will be implemented, and you can't make a promise like that and not follow through. You've got to follow through. And we just have to keep pressuring our politicians to follow through with that, federally and provincially.
Great, thanks, Jack. Next question from Beverly. How long do you think this court case will last?
Well, the good news here is we submitted just today, by the way, our proposed trial schedule, a total of 8 weeks. That sounds like a long trial, but Nuchatlaht again is on the forefront here. The objective is to do this case in less than 10% of the time and for less than 10% of the cost of the previous Aboriginal title case, which was the Chilcotin case. So we're on a whole order of magnitude more efficient and quicker. Now, all of the delay, and I'm unhesitating in saying this, that all of the delay is caused by the resistance by the provincial government. Canada is being more or less passive. So British Columbia is just making it more expensive and more difficult. And so it's an 8-week trial. It could be, I said at the very beginning, when we first had a trial management judge, I said this should be done in 2 weeks. And the reason I said 2 weeks, there's precedent for that. The late Tom Berger, when he took the Calder case, that was the Nisga'a claim, to British Columbia Supreme Court in 1967, he did it in 2 weeks. And there's no reason this case should take more than 2 weeks. I said that to the judge. Everybody said, oh, wow, that would be good. But it can't take 2 weeks when you have a province saying, arguing extinguishment and abandonment and being too small and weak. We have to overcome those arguments. We have to say, no, they didn't abandon it and their title was not extinguished. And the fact is they're not too small and weak. So we have to meet those arguments. If the province would drop those arguments, we could do it in 2 weeks or less. It's not again, to quote the late, great Tom Berger, he said, you know what these cases are? This is the tedious proof of the obvious. Mm-hmm. He knows, everybody knows that the First Nations were there, that this is all lands that belong to the Indigenous people. It always has. That's why way back in 1875, the government of British Columbia published a book called Papers Connected with the Indian Land Question. A whole book full of letters and documents. Nothing's changed. This has been the issue for British Columbia for 200 years. It's time to resolve it now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question from Ted. What other First Nations may be or be poised to challenge the provincial government with UNDRIP to their Aboriginal rights? Is it Nuchatlaht just at this time? Is it just Nuchatlaht at this time? Do you know any other nations that are doing the same?
There are a few cases. There's none that are sort of poised to go to trial like this one is. it's very, very difficult to get a case like this into court, to keep it. It's like a train going down a wobbly track. It's easy to fall off, and most cases fall off the track. And you know, there's been a major effort and discipline on the part of the Nuchatlaht people to keep this thing on the track so that we can have a trial. But you know, the Haida people have a case that they're trying to push ahead. It's difficult. The Coquitlam people at Coquitlam, they have a case. There's cases out there. The Cowichan tribes have a case. There's a number of cases, but it's very hard to get them into court. So it's surprising, you know, the Chilcotin decision from the Supreme Court of Canada came down in 2014, and I thought there's going to be a flood of cases after that. There just would be lots of them, and there haven't been. Basically, contrary to popular opinion, First Nations are generally reluctant to go to court, shy of the court system, much more interested in a negotiated solution than a litigated solution, and they're polite and civil and don't really like the adversarial structure of the court system. That's a gross generalization, but that's my experience after decades of working for First Nations, is that they don't really want to go to court. But you know, when your back's against the wall, you've got to do something. And 80% of the Nuchatlaht claim area has been logged. 80%. There's only 20% of the old growth forest left. And the evidence that we're going to present to the court is that that 80% that was cut, those magnificent ancient cedar trees, many of those were culturally modified trees. So this was, the evidence we're going to present to the court is that this was a magnificent archaeological site, the whole of the territory. The whole area was infused with the evidence of human occupation for several hundred years, particularly culturally modified trees. Now, culturally modified trees are generally cedar trees that show evidence of either bark stripping, where people took bark from the tree in order to do all of the things that were done with bark, everything from making clothing and hats to ropes. It was essential to the Nuchatlaht culture. And of course, the nice thing is you can take the bark off a red cedar tree and the tree heals up. And that creates a lobe, a healing lobe. And so the tree survives and continues to grow, and you can harvest that again in the future. So it's a sustainable way of harvesting that essential resource. Also, even more dramatic is that a plank could be taken out of a tree, and used for all sorts of purposes, particularly the great cedar house planks that were put to make the roofs and the walls of those magnificent cedar houses that people had. And still the tree would survive, and it would heal and grow again. And so these trees, the evidence is that these trees are up to 1,000 years old, and they show continuous evidence of human use, and yet they're still alive. It's just incredible. And so this is an archaeological site of world importance, and it's been vandalized. 80% of it has been cut down. It's as if somebody went to Athens and went up to the Acropolis, to the Parthenon, and decided to use it to make marble countertops for high-end apartments. You know, it's vandalism of an archaeological site of just of a shocking degree. And of course, there's the village sites with their shell middens and with the remains of the ancient dwellings, the depressions where the houses were. In some cases, some poles. There's of course there's places where people were buried. There's graveyards. One of the bits of evidence we're going to present to the court is brand new. This is the first time it's ever been presented to court because it's new science, which is the evidence of forest gardens. So a magnificent report by Dr. Chelsea Armstrong, a scientist associated with Nancy Turner and the Simon Fraser University ethnobotany department. She has developed this study of of the places on Nootka Island where the ancestors, where Archie and Jordan's ancestors deliberately planted and cultivated food plants, particularly trees, particularly crab apples, but 17 species of bushes and trees for food purposes, and those are an aberration on the landscape in the sense that that's not just wilderness. Ground was cleared, trees and bushes were planted. These were gardens and cultivated. This was agriculture, it's that evidence has never been presented in court. The Western imagination is that this is wilderness, that somehow the native people lived in the wilderness without. No, it's not. It's a fully culturally managed landscape, sustainably managed, so that it's, of course, as Archie said at the beginning of the video, it's beautiful, it's magnificent, but it's a human landscape. This is where the people lived and thrived and were wealthy until the coming of colonization. I'm sorry, I've gone a little beyond the question, but I got excited there because the fact is, other First Nations will benefit from this case because this is breaking some ice, making room for not just other cases as a legal precedent, but new kinds of evidence. For example, this evidence of forest gardens, which has never been presented to court before.
Great. So the next question is from Zoe, and I'm going to direct this to Archie and Jordan. Jack, you touched on this a little bit, but what does logging in the territory look like right now? Maybe Archie and Jordan can touch on that a bit.
Jordan is on the grounds.
Yeah. I've been set foot out on Nootka about 6 years ago. We wanted to explore salvage opportunities and maybe have a look at the state of Nootka Island itself. And it didn't take too long to get out there and realize that, BC and Canada has the whole world convinced that they're, sustainably harvesting timber, right? And it's made to believe like they put aside areas for like First Nations harvesting and, places to take your kids to, to play or whatever, rec sites or whatever. And when you get out there on the ground and look around, it's just total decimation. It may say that on a map that it's a place to take your kids or whatever, but it's just clear cut with nothing left, right? So there's no cedar left to harvest. There's just I call it the guts and feathers, right? There's and that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting, even now we're on to like the guts and feathers. We started a cedar salvage, blow down salvage program, and we find ourselves fighting like the Western forest products for the last of that now too. And it's pretty obvious what this is all about. So they just want the last. They want the last piece of timber on Nootka Island. And so just to answer your question, there's not a lot left there, and what is left there is blowing over on a daily basis. And so it's kind of what we want to work on.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I can echo that after spending a bit of time on Nootka on an expedition just to check out the logging there. I can definitely see that the logging has impacted that island greatly, for sure. Yeah. And not a lot of old growth left. Archie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And Jordan is our Taiye. Welcome, Jordan. I just want to talk about what Jordan was mentioning, but our Hosta Creek River, that belongs to Jordan. And everybody in Nuchatlaht knows that. And the sad part is that we have to fight to protect it. They wanted to log around the lake, and we can't allow them to do that. And what burns me up is that we clear cut everything, and then send it across seas with no benefit to Nuchatlaht, and we only have 20% left, and I'd like to just say that we're begging the province to do right. That we need to work together. There's a lot of damage done. There's a lot of work that has to begin if we're going to leave trees and resources for 7 generations. We're a little behind, and we need to start that work, and also to use it as to use our history, because as I said, if Jordan was in trouble, if somebody came and tried to get rid of Nuchatlaht, all the chiefs would be there to support him because they're family. And that's the way Nuchatlaht is set up. It's always protecting each other because they were married to Hakum, to queens, the Hatwe. And so it's crazy that we have to go to court to try and save something. We have to go to court to try and do better. We have to go to court to show them that we can do better, instead of coming to a discussion and agreeing that we have a lot of work to do, that we have to do a lot of mending, and just so people understand who Heathamish was, the first Jordan's great-grandfather. Him and late Harry Dick of Nuchatlaht, and Jack knows him, old man Harry Dick. All of Nuchatlaht Hatwe had to go to Jordan's great-grandfather to get permission to hold potlatches. That's how much power that man held. And he's all of a sudden going to disappear? No, everybody would know. Everybody would come and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. I have a question here for Jordan again. 2 separate questions, so I'll ask them both. From Judith, are there any remaining overlapping claims on the territory? Is one of them. And then another one is from Leslie. Are there ancient clam or sea gardens on Nootka Island? So maybe Jordan, you could address those 2.
Oh, good questions.
Yeah, maybe Jack can answer that, George.
Yeah, Jack, you wanna? I mean, I can. Yeah, I don't know, Jack. Wanna speak to
Well, we're not introducing evidence about the clam gardens. Yes, there is, but we're not introducing that evidence because this case is above the high water mark, so it's just land. There's different complications, legal complications in connection with the foreshore and the offshore. And it's same with overlaps. The case has been designed to avoid overlaps. So in fact, the Nuchatlaht have quite generously pulled their line back of the claim area to specifically avoid any claim with their neighboring First Nation. Again, for legal reasons, the government loves it when there's competing claims, because the government sits back and says, well, that First Nation is going to prove their title and say that they own it, and then the other First Nation will prove their title and say they own it, and so then therefore nobody owns it. So we avoided that, and it takes restraint to do this, to not advance the full extent of your claim. And I'm constantly in admiration of Archie and Taiye Jordan that they, because they know that their claim is bigger than this. They know it's bigger, but they're prepared to go to court. And by the way, that doesn't preclude a future case where they go for the overlap territory. They can do that later. But let's one step at a time. Let's take one bite at a time. It's still a pretty substantial area. Somebody asked how big. It's 200 square kilometers, about twice the size of the city of Vancouver. Although 80% of it has been logged into oblivion, but still there's a lot of lovely land and territory left. Can I go right into the question about parks? Because what you don't know behind the scenes is that Nuchatlaht is developing a plan, has been developing a plan, and will have a plan for the use of this land. Now, they don't have any legal obligation to do so. They're entitled, once they win this case, and we will win, they're entitled to ownership of the land and to use it for whatever economic benefit they see fit, or they can not use it, or whatever they want. It's theirs. They own it. They will own it. But nevertheless, they're very responsible and they're very interested in preserving this land for the future. So what they're doing is developing plans for salmon parks, which you've heard mentioned. The thing about salmon, it sounds like a contradiction, right? I think salmon come from the ocean. No, in fact, salmon come from the land. Salmon come from the bush. And so that's why you need to preserve areas on the land where the salmon can be healthy, including Archie's been mentioning to you the name of a river and a lake. It's a sockeye. You know, sockeye need both a river and then a lake at the head of the river to spawn. That's the specific conditions that sockeye need. And Chief Taiye Jordan Michael owns in the Indigenous laws. He owns that particular creek and lake, Oista, and that's part of his package of ownership, his hahoulthee. And when we win this case, that creek and lake, which is potentially highly productive of sockeye, will be his. He'll own it, and he will restore it to its former abundance as a salmon park. But that's not the only kind of park. There's also, part of the claim is an area called Nuchatlaht's Provincial Park. Now, the province came and took quite a nice little chunk of what's under claim here and made it into a provincial park a couple of decades ago without asking the Nuchatlaht. And so now, of course, the Nuchatlaht can't use that land either. They're prohibited from using it. But they're not planning to go in and destroy it. They're planning to make it into an Indigenous park, what has sometimes been called a tribal park. And let me just explain to you, some people, you've heard the words tribal park. I want to explain that. It's a bit of a legal thing here, but I think it's interesting. A tribal park is a place where the habitat of the animals and the different species is preserved to such an extent that Aboriginal rights can still be exercised. So to have a tribal park, you have to have a healthy environment. You have to have a healthy habitat. Because it's not a static part. It's not like a locked up wilderness. It's not like the old 19th and 20th century version of a park, which is basically this frozen wilderness. We don't want to touch it. No, it's a living environment. It's a living environment such that it will produce the abundance that is necessary to support Aboriginal rights. The very abundance that Archie was just talking about when he said we used to be rich. They were rich. And that will be reestablished by the preservation of these habitats that are necessary to support the exercise of Aboriginal rights.
Thanks for that, Jack. I have a question here from Fred. This is for Jack. Do you think this court trial will lead to Indigenous nations being able to access their own territories in terms of volumes being logged, and for Indigenous nations to have more authority in managing their territories? And second part is also, will this court case and trial clarify the differences between hereditary and elected chiefs, so it won't be such an issue as it is in Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan territories?
Well, it won't deal with the second one, because this case is a case where Nuchatlaht has a customary government system, and it's acknowledged in the Indian Act. The Indian Act actually specifically refers to the Nuchatlaht as having a customary government. So it's not just their own laws, but they're acknowledged by the laws of Canada to have a customary government. So there's no issue there, and that's not going to be decided in this case because it doesn't need to be decided. As for what this will do for other First Nations, absolutely. This is a precedent-setting case. This is the first application of the Chilcotin case on the coast. So the thing about the Chilcotin case was it decided Aboriginal title for the first time. For the first time in British Columbia history, a First Nation was able to establish in court the decision of the late great Mr. Justice Vickers of the British Columbia Supreme Court, that was then upheld at the Supreme Court of Canada in 2014, established that the Chilcotin people had Aboriginal title to their land. Now, the difficulty is that that area of British Columbia, during the course of those proceedings, there was 2 huge forest fires and most of the trees burned up, and they didn't have much economic value anyway. So although the land is beautiful and exquisite, actually, it's a magnificent part of the world, it doesn't have a lot of economic value. There is a plan to have a gold mine there that you'll have heard about, the Taseko mine. That's economic value, but the Chilcotin people have heroically resisted the building of that mine and the destroying of Fish Lake is what it's called. But apart from the gold mine, the land itself it's not an impact on the British Columbia economy because there was no plans to use that land. Now, this one is different. Nuchatlaht is different. This is the great, productive, magnificent cedar forests on the west coast. So this actually does have an economic hit to the province because the province will have to figure out what to do. Because the remedy that we're seeking is the same as in Chilcotin. Aboriginal title exists, and therefore the Forest Act ceases to apply. That's the remedy. Now, when the Forest Act ceases to apply, something's going to happen. The forest companies are going to have to deal with Nuchatlaht, not with the provincial government. And Nuchatlaht may decide that they're not going to keep cutting down those trees. That's going to be a decision made by the Nuchatlaht people. And I got to tell you, up and down the coast of British Columbia, I trust the local decisions of the Indigenous nations more than the centralized decision-making coming out of Victoria, which has been such an utter failure. For decades, it's been a complete failure. Of course, there's been a lot of wealth created by cutting down all those trees, but as an environmental matter, as a matter of preserving cultural heritage and sustainability, it's been a complete disaster. And so I certainly trust, of course, there'll be First Nations when they get their land back that make a mess of things. Let's be realistic. Some First Nations are going to be no less greedy than the existing situation. But most First Nations have at least a dual agenda. They at least have the agenda of loving their land. They're from there. They care about their land. They want to protect it. They're not running the show from an office building in Vancouver or New York. They're running the show right from where they live, and they care about that land. So I trust them more than the provincial government to take care of the land when they get it back. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a great transfer of wealth, a great transfer of those forests and those trees from Crown land owned by the province and therefore has been alienated to these multinational forest companies. That wealth is going to be transferred to the Indigenous nations up and down the coast of British Columbia. That's a transformative thing. That's going to be a big, big change. And I trust those Indigenous nations more than I trust centralized capitalistic government decision-making.
Thanks, Jack. I was hoping that Archie and Jordan could elaborate a bit on their vision for the territory and how they will manage it moving forward. You're muted, Archie.
Well, can I go, Jordan?
Yeah, go ahead, Archie.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, I just want to talk about what Jack reported in our last Zoom meeting, and where he mentioned 5 things that are going to change, and of course one of them is in salmon parks, and the other one is we're going to define reconciliation, and climate change. We're going to get all that equipment, you get off on Nootka Island, and there's going to be local management, local benefits, and of course we're going to save outgrowth. we may say that, these logging companies, they plant trees, but now we're learning they're planting the wrong type of trees. I mean, look at how they program these trees. We're in climate change, and these trees, they suck up water like crazy. And the summers are getting drier and drier, and so we have to manage that better. And understanding old growth keeps the land stable and holds water. And so and then we trade that off for trees that suck up every ounce of water, and it dries the soil. And then we have slides, So and to me, I think the biggest change is going to be is that our hotway are going to own it now. Our hotway are going to manage it better, and and we're going to protect it better, because we're at an all-time low in all resources. And we need to take a critical look at what we can do in the short term, and you could have a plan for years down the road, but to see that healing process where where the people and the resources are healthy.
All right, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Archie. We've got through a lot of the questions that are in the chat there, and I think we'll move into some opportunities that we have for folks to take action in the lead up to the court case and beyond that. We'll go back for a final thought or two from Archie, Jordan, and Jack in a few minutes. But first of all, some ways that you can help out. So get ready to save some links. Em's going to drop these into the chat in a moment here as I mention them. First up is helping people from the community of Nuchatlaht and from the nation get to Vancouver to witness this historic moment for their people. Some Nuchatlaht people live on the territory, others live elsewhere on Vancouver Island and all around, and it's important that as many members from the community as possible that want to can get to Vancouver. So we're raising some funds to help community members travel. And if you're in a position to help support that, I really encourage you to do so. I see the link there in the chat. And again, that's to help folks get over to Vancouver to visit the Supreme Court on the morning of March 21st and be there for this moment for their people. For those of you that are on the Lower Mainland, I can see folks calling in from a whole bunch of different areas. Those of you I know. For folks that are on in Vancouver or on the Lower Mainland, please join us on the morning of the 21st. We're going to stand with Nuchatlaht at 8:30 in the morning outside of the Supreme Court and really show some support, make some noise, let this community know that they're not standing alone, that there are those of us who aren't from their communities, but we support them in this, and we support their stand against the British Columbia government, and we support the return of land to them. So that rally's at 8:30 in the morning at the Supreme Court downtown. There's the Facebook event page for it there. Please contact us if you need some more details. And finally, in terms of action, I mentioned our BC government, our BC NDP government, the Horgan government, the self-declared government of reconciliation, and the fact that they're fighting tooth and nail against a nation asserting its self-determination on its territory. I just, as a non-Indigenous person, as a settler, I just find that so shameful. It's our government has to do better. It's 2022. We've been talking about reconciliation for years. We're in a climate crisis, and there's a nation that's standing up and saying, "This is ours. We'd like to manage it as we always have," and the government's sicking its lawyers on them. It's completely the opposite of what the BC NDP government is saying that they would do and how they would operate. And we need to let them know that. We need to let them know that we see their hypocrisy, we see their double standard, and we're not okay with it, and it needs to end. So we have an action page on our website. It's there in the chat now. You can write a letter to the Attorney General, David Eby. It also goes to the Premier himself, to Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Minister Murray Rankin, and to your own MLA. It's critical that that these politicians know we see them and they hear from us, and know that we want them to stand down and to treat the Nuchatlaht, all Nuchatlaht, and all First Nations in what we call BC with honor, and that means stop fighting the Nuchatlaht. So those are a few ways that you can help out. There'll be lots more on this in the next couple of weeks. Follow the Wilderness Committee. If you don't already, we're working with groups like Sierra Club BC and Stand to support the Nuchatlaht, and we'll have lots more ways for people to get involved. I'll pass it over for some final thoughts. Maybe Jordan, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, thanks, Torrance. Yeah, I know it's I'd just like to touch on I guess that question about what we plan on doing. Yeah, no, pretty excited about the opportunity to address a lot of our social problems and housing, issues. We come from a really rich territory, but we are all jammed on a little reservation, kind of living like in a third world country kind of thing. So just the possibilities that are about to unfold, I mean, it's just going to create a lot of opportunities for us that we're, pretty excited about. So yeah, and I just want to thank everybody for coming out to hear our story. Let go.
Thanks, Jack, or maybe then Jack and then Archie.
Sure. I just wanted to, if anyone needs to hear the reasons why this is a great cause. This is about biodiversity. This is about climate change. This is about local control of resources. This is about cultural preservation and continuity of culture. This is about justice. This is about reconciliation. This is about getting First Nations their land back. That's what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
Archie, did you have any words to close us on this evening?
Sure. Just on behalf of our Taiye copper maker, we want to say tako, tako, tako to all those that came and to hear us and to hopefully support and to understand why this is important to us. It's ensuring that Nuchatlaht stay Nuchatlaht, and we just want to, let you know that we won't lose. We can't lose, and we came into this process thinking that way, that losing was not in our vocabulary. We're here to win. We're here to change. We're here to make things better for everybody, because not just Nuchatlaht, but those that live around us. And I think it's come full circle. I often talk about the generosity of the Nuchatlaht or Taiye. Take Jordan's grandfather, where he allowed people to come and live with us in Nuchatlaht. And we as children, we just assumed they were Nuchatlaht, but they were Taiye from other nations. They came to live with us. And Jordan's grandfather allowed that. We had people from Moachet, we had people from Quatsino, we had people from Nuchatlaht, we had people from Yadisset that came. And we have a reserve on I forgot the name of it now. Oh, Kitala. the Nuchatlaht Island. We have a reserve, and our Taiye hahoulthee allowed people to stop there and to rest as they're going up and down the coast. This is old history, where they were traveling in canoes. And now, to me, it's gone full circle. And now Felix is going to be, what he did, his generosity, it's now going to come back to the Nuchatlaht people. And we thank you guys on behalf of the Nuchatlaht people for even coming to sit with us. And I want to thank you guys for inviting our Taiye hahoulthee to come and sit with us and talk and listen and have action. We all have to do something. It's not just court, but we all have to do writing. We all have to do speaking to encourage the province to come to their senses, quickly. And hopefully we can do that. And Jack, a special thanks to you for all the work that you've done, for believing, Jack, for believing that we can do it. Where Jack didn't say, no, you're small, go away. Jack's words were, you're governors. That's where the strength is. And I firmly believe that.
Wow, thank you. What a beautiful note to end on, Archie. Look at us, 7 or 8 minutes early. That's great. We're obviously all hungry for justice, but I think we're all getting hungry for dinner too. So we can call it a little early tonight. And yeah, thank you so much to all 3 speakers for sharing your words and knowledge with all of us. To my colleagues at the Wilderness Committee for hosting, and to all of you for being here. Let's stay in touch. Let's build some community and show some real solidarity with this nation as they stand up to BC and show a better path forward on this coast for all of us. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you soon.